My stepmother tried to charge me rent in my dad's house, without knowing that I was the real owner. I was 8 years old when my mom died, breast cancer. It happened fast, like way faster than anyone expected. One day she was complaining about being tired, and 6 months later we were picking out her casket. I don't remember a lot from that time, honestly. My brain kind of blocked most of it out, which my therapist says is normal. What I do remember is my dad sitting on the edge of my bed the night after the funeral, crying so hard he couldn't breathe, and me patting his back like I was the parent and he was the kid. My grandparents, Mom's parents, sold their house 2 weeks later. Just like that. They'd lived in this little ranch-style place in the suburbs for 30 years, and they gave it up without even blinking. They bought this massive property in one of the nice neighborhoods in Boston, the kind with old trees lining the streets and houses that look like they belong in magazines. It had 6 bedrooms, which seemed insane at the time, but my grandfather said they needed the space. What he meant was, they needed to save us. Moving in together was weird at first. My dad was barely functional, just going through the motions of existing. He'd forget to eat unless someone put food directly in front of him. He'd wear the same shirt 3 days in a row. My grandmother basically took over everything. Cooking, cleaning, making sure I got to school on time, helping with homework. My grandfather handled the practical stuff, like bills and yard work and fixing things that broke. They created this bubble around us, this safe little world where we could fall apart without everything actually falling apart, you know? We developed routines, Sunday morning pancakes with my grandmother, Wednesday night movie marathons with my grandfather while my dad worked late. Every night before bed, we'd go to Mom's memorial corner in the living room, this beautiful shelf my grandfather built with her photos and some of her favorite things, and we'd tell her about our day. It sounds cheesy, but it helped. It made her feel less gone. The first 2 years were the hardest. I'd see other kids with their moms at school events and just want to disappear. Birthdays were brutal. Holidays were worse. But my grandparents were always there, steady and solid and refusing to let us drown in the sadness. My dad slowly came back to himself. He started smiling again, laughing at my grandfather's terrible jokes, actually engaging with life instead of just surviving it. By the time I was 10, things felt almost normal. Different from before, obviously. There was this mom-shaped hole that nothing could fill. But we'd built something new around it. The house stopped feeling so empty. My dad started talking about the future again, making plans, setting goals. He threw himself into his work, which I guess was his way of coping. He traveled a lot for conferences and meetings, but he always came home. We were his anchor. Then one night, about a month after my 10th birthday, he sat us all down in the living room. He had this nervous energy, fidgeting with his hands, not quite meeting anyone's eyes. My grandmother noticed immediately. She had this radar for emotional disturbances. She set down her tea and gave him this look that said, "Whatever you're about to say, just say it." Dad cleared his throat. "I met someone," he said, "in Chicago, at the medical device conference last month." The room went completely silent. My grandfather's newspaper crinkled as he lowered it. My grandmother's face did this complicated thing where it tried to look supportive, but you could see the concern underneath. I just sat there on the carpet, confused about why this felt like bad news when it was supposed to be good news. "Her name is Angela," Dad continued, talking faster now like he needed to get it all out before he lost his nerve. "She's brilliant. She works in medical sales. She has 2 kids, a son who's 19 and a daughter who's 16. We've been talking every day since we met, and I know this is fast, but I really think this could be something special." Special. That word echoed in my head. Mom had been special. What we had here, in this house, with my grandparents holding us together, that was special. This felt like something else entirely. But I was 10 years old. What did I know? 6 months. That's how long it took for Dad to go from, "I met someone" to, "We're getting married." 6 months of phone calls every night, weekend trips to Chicago, and Angela visiting our house with her kids. My grandparents were polite about it, painfully polite, but I could see the worry in their eyes every time Dad announced another visit. Angela was beautiful in that calculated way some women are. Perfect hair, perfect makeup, designer clothes that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. She smiled a lot, but it never quite reached her eyes. Her son was this brooding 19-year-old who spent the entire first visit on his phone, and her daughter barely looked up from her tablet long enough to say hello. They didn't seem particularly interested in getting to know us, which should have been the first red flag. The second red flag was how Angela kept commenting on the house. "This is quite the property," she'd say, walking through the rooms like she was doing an inspection. "Must be worth a fortune in this neighborhood." Or, Your father-in-law has excellent taste in real estate. She'd run her fingers along the furniture, peer into closets, ask weird questions about property taxes and home insurance. My grandmother noticed. She didn't say anything directly, but I'd catch her and my grandfather having these whispered conversations in the kitchen that stopped the moment anyone else entered. Dad was oblivious. He was so caught up in feeling alive again, in having someone pay attention to him, that he couldn't see what the rest of us saw. When my grandfather gently suggested maybe slowing down, taking more time, Dad got defensive. "You just don't want me to be happy," he said, which was so unfair it made my grandmother cry. They wanted him happy. They just wanted him smart about it. The wedding happened at City Hall on a rainy Thursday in October. It was small, just immediate family and a couple of Dad's colleagues. Angela wore white, which my grandmother side-eyed but didn't comment on. Her kids looked bored throughout the entire ceremony. I wore the dress my mom had bought me for Easter the year before she died, and spent most of the reception trying not to think about how wrong everything felt. They moved into our house the following weekend. Angela didn't ask if this was okay, didn't suggest maybe looking for a new place together where everyone could start fresh. She just arrived with moving trucks and started directing where furniture should go. "We'll need to make some changes," she announced, surveying the living room with a critical eye. "This space has so much potential, but it needs updating." My grandfather's jaw tightened. "This house belongs," he started, but my grandmother put a hand on his arm. Later, I heard her tell him they needed to give it time, that Dad had the right to make his own choices, that interfering would only push him away. I think she believed Angela would show her true colors eventually and Dad would see sense. What none of us realized was how long eventually would take. The changes started small. A new throw pillow here, a different centerpiece there. Angela rearranged the kitchen cabinets to make things more efficient. She replaced our family photos on the mantle with generic art prints she'd ordered online. Each alteration felt like a tiny erasure of Mom's presence. A slow, systematic removal of everything that made this house ours. Her kids claimed the two nicest guest bedrooms without asking. They left wet towels on the floor, played loud music at night, helped themselves to food without offering to cook or clean up. My dad's stepson crashed his car 2 weeks after moving in, drove it straight into a telephone pole while texting, and my dad just bought him a new one. No consequences, no conversation about responsibility, just a replacement vehicle and a pat on the back. I came home from school on a Tuesday in March, I was 12 then, to find Angela in the attic with garbage bags. Plural. Multiple giant black bags already filled and tied shut, sitting by the stairs. She was humming while she worked, pulling things out of boxes and making snap decisions about their fate. "What are you doing?" I asked, my stomach already dropping because I knew. Somehow, I just knew. "Spring cleaning," she said brightly, wiping dust off her hands. This attic was a disaster, I swear. People just accumulate so much junk over the years. But don't worry, I'm donating most of it. Someone else can get use out of all this old stuff. Old stuff. I walked over to the nearest bag and opened it. Mom's Christmas ornaments stared back at me. The ones she'd made by hand, ceramic angels she'd painted when she was pregnant with me, the felt snowmen with button eyes, the wooden nativity set her mother had given her. All of it, thrown away like trash. "These aren't junk," I said, my voice shaking. "These were my mom's." Angela waved a dismissive hand. "Honey, they were taking up space. Nobody's used them in years. Besides, we bought all new decorations last Christmas. Remember? Much nicer ones." I opened another bag. Mom's clothes. The sweater she wore every fall because it was soft and smelled like vanilla. The dress she wore to my kindergarten graduation. The jacket with the broken zipper she kept meaning to fix. I pulled out a photo album and flipped through it. Mom's entire pregnancy, my first year of life, holidays, birthdays, all documented in careful detail with her handwriting in the margins. "Where are the rest of the albums?" I demanded. "Already in the donation bags by the garage," Angela said, not even looking up from the box she was currently destroying. Honestly, who needs 5 photo albums? Everyone has phones now. I ran downstairs and outside. 6 more bags sat by the garage door, already loaded into her car. I ripped them open one after another. Mom's jewelry, her books with notes in the margins, the quilt her grandmother had made, the ceramic vase she'd gotten on her honeymoon, her recipe cards with splatters and stains from actual use, letters from my dad during their courtship, my baby blanket, my first pair of shoes, everything. She'd thrown away everything. My grandparents got home 20 minutes later to find me sitting in the driveway surrounded by open bags, crying so hard I couldn't catch my breath. My grandmother's face went absolutely white when she saw what Angela had done. My grandfather made a sound I'd never heard before, something between a growl and a gasp. Dad was called home from work. Angela played the victim beautifully. She was just trying to help. She thought she was being useful. Nobody had told her those things were important. She couldn't possibly have known. How was she supposed to understand the significance of random boxes in the attic? They were in the attic, my grandfather said, his voice dangerously quiet. In clearly labeled boxes. Boxes that said your late wife's name on them. I was trying to modernize, Angela protested, actual tears forming now. This house is stuck in the past. It's not healthy. Everyone needs to move forward. My grandmother said something then that I'll never forget. You don't get to decide when we're done grieving. Dad stood there looking torn, literally turning between his wife and his daughter and his in-laws, trying to keep everyone happy and failing spectacularly. In the end, he asked for peace. Just peace. Could everyone please just try to get along? Angela hadn't meant any harm. She'd apologize and be more careful next time. We'd save what was left and keep it safe. Everything would be fine. But it wasn't fine. We'd recovered maybe half of Mom's things. The rest were gone, donated to some thrift store where strangers would paw through the remnants of her life without knowing what they meant. And I learned something important that day. My feelings, my grief, my memories, they were all less important than keeping Angela comfortable. That was the new rule of the house. The chore situation started gradually, the way poisonous things usually do. First, it was just helping with dishes after dinner, which seemed reasonable. Then it was dishes plus wiping down the counters. Then it was the entire kitchen cleanup while Angela's daughter sat in the living room watching videos on her laptop. By the time I was 14, I was responsible for cleaning all the bathrooms, doing my own laundry plus the household towels, vacuuming the entire first floor, and helping with meal prep. My dad's stepson, who was 21 by then and still living at home rent-free, did absolutely nothing. His excuse was that he was focusing on his athletic training, which apparently meant going to the gym 3 times a week and playing video games the rest of the time. My stepsister, who was 18 and in community college, was supposedly too busy with school to contribute. Never mind that I was taking advanced placement classes and had a heavier course load than she did. Whenever my grandparents pointed out the disparity, Angela had an excuse ready. Her son had potential. He needed to concentrate on his fitness goals. Her daughter was delicate. She couldn't handle stress. She needed support during this transitional period. And me? I was being taught responsibility. Character building, Angela called it. Life skills. The inspection system started when I was 15. Angela would run her finger along the top of door frames, checking for dust. She'd use a paper towel to wipe the inside rim of the toilets I'd cleaned, looking for any trace of residue. She'd open the refrigerator and comment if items weren't arranged to her liking. If she found anything, and she always found something, I'd have to redo the entire task while she supervised. Meanwhile, my stepsister's room looked like a tornado had hit it. Clothes everywhere, food wrappers on the floor, dishes growing mold on her nightstand. My stepbrother's room smelled so bad my grandmother refused to walk past it with the door open. But bringing this up only resulted in another lecture about how I shouldn't compare myself to others, how everyone contributed differently, how I needed to focus on my own behavior. My grandparents tried to help. They'd sneak in and do things before Angela noticed they needed doing. They'd take over cooking dinner to give me a break. They offered repeatedly to hire a cleaning service, but Angela always refused. "We don't need strangers in the house," she'd say. What she meant was, "We have free labor right here." When I turned 16, I got a job at a coffee shop, partly for money, partly for escape. Angela was not pleased. "Your grades better not suffer," she warned, "and you still need to keep up with your chores." Having a job doesn't excuse you from family responsibilities. Family responsibilities. That's rich, considering her kids contributed nothing but mess and expense. My stepbrother wrecked his second car that year, drove it into a ditch while drunk, and my dad bailed him out of the DUI charge and bought him another vehicle. My stepsister failed half her classes and needed a private tutor that cost $300 an hour, but I needed to work minimum wage and scrub toilets to learn responsibility. I worked 3 shifts a week after school and all day Saturday. I'd come home exhausted, muscles aching, smelling like coffee and cleaning products, and Angela would be waiting with a list. The laundry needed folding, the floors needed mopping, the bathrooms needed attention. And could I please do it quickly because guests were coming over tomorrow and the house needed to look presentable? Her kids would walk past me while I worked, not even acknowledging my existence. They'd drop their dishes in the sink, leave their shoes in the middle of the hallway, drag mud across the floors I'd just cleaned, and when I pointed it out, I was being difficult, causing problems, not being a team player. My grandmother pulled me aside one night after Angela had spent 20 minutes berating me for missing a spot on the bathroom mirror. "This isn't right," she whispered. "You know that, don't you? What she's doing to you isn't normal or fair." I knew. I'd known for a while. But what could I do about it? I was 16 years old with nowhere else to go. My grandmother had a heart attack on a Sunday morning in October. She was making her famous cinnamon rolls, my mom's recipe, actually, when she just collapsed. My grandfather found her on the kitchen floor and called for help, but by the time the ambulance arrived, it was too late. She died at the hospital an hour later with all of us around her. I held her hand while the machines beeped their final rhythm. I was 16 years old and watching my last connection to my mother slip away. The funeral was huge. My grandmother had been beloved in the community, involved in charity work and book clubs and neighborhood associations. People I'd never met came up to tell me stories about her kindness. But all I could think about was how alone I felt. My grandfather looked like he'd aged 20 years overnight. Dad was devastated. Even Angela seemed genuinely sad, which almost made me feel bad for disliking her. Almost. My grandfather only lasted 3 months. The doctor said it was pneumonia, but I knew better. He died of a broken heart. They'd been married for 47 years. He'd loved my grandmother since they were teenagers. Without her, he just gave up. He stopped eating properly, stopped taking his medication, stopped caring. I found him in his chair one morning, looking peaceful for the first time since my grandmother had died. The book he'd been reading was still open on his lap. I sat with him for a while before calling anyone, just holding his hand and saying goodbye to the last person who'd really understood me. The lawyer came 2 days after the funeral. We were all in the living room, me, Dad, Angela, and her 2 kids. The will reading felt surreal, like something from a movie. My grandfather had been meticulous about his affairs. Everything was organized, documented, labeled. And then came the bombshell. The property at this address, the lawyer said, adjusting his glasses, was placed in an irrevocable trust when purchased. The beneficiary is named as their granddaughter, with full ownership transferring at age 18. You could have heard a pin drop. Angela's face went through about 6 different expressions in 3 seconds. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice tight. "Could you repeat that?" The lawyer repeated it. "The house, this entire house, the one Angela had been renovating and redecorating like she owned it, belonged to me, had belonged to me since my grandparents purchased it. They'd set it up that way deliberately, a trust fund property that would be mine the moment I turned 18. But she's only 16, Angela said, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. Which is why your husband was named as temporary administrator," the lawyer continued. "He'll manage the property until she reaches majority. At that time, full control transfers to her." My dad looked stunned. "They never told me," he said quietly. "I mean, I signed papers when they bought it, but I didn't realize." The lawyer pulled out an envelope. They left a letter explaining their decision. Dad opened it with shaking hands. I watched him read, watched his face crumple, watched tears start sliding down his cheeks. He handed it to me without a word. The letter was from both of them, written in my grandmother's perfect cursive. They explained everything, how they'd wanted to protect their daughter's legacy, how they'd wanted to ensure I had security and stability, something that could never be taken away, how they'd worried about Dad remarrying, not because they didn't want him to be happy, but because they'd seen too many second marriages where the new spouse's priorities differed from the children's best interests. They'd been right to worry. They'd been so right. "This doesn't change anything right now," my dad said, though his voice lacked conviction. "We'll just continue as we have been." But Angela's expression said otherwise. She excused herself and disappeared into the bedroom. I heard muffled phone calls throughout the evening, her voice rising and falling behind closed doors. At dinner, she was cold and silent, pushing food around her plate while shooting me these looks that made my skin crawl. That night, lying in bed, I realized something important. My grandparents had given me a weapon. They'd given me power. And in exactly 2 years, I'd be able to use it. 17 was the longest year of my life. Knowing what waited at the end made every day both better and worse. Better because I had hope. Worse because I had to keep pretending everything was normal while Angela circled like a shark who'd smelled blood. My stepbrother graduated from college that spring. And by graduated, I mean he finally finished his bachelor's degree in communications after 6 years and 2 major changes. My dad threw him a massive party, invited everyone, made speeches about being proud. Meanwhile, this guy had no job prospects, no ambition, and no plans beyond moving back home temporarily to figure things out. He moved into one of the spare rooms permanently. At 25 years old, he couldn't be bothered to contribute rent or groceries or even clean up after himself. My dad supported him completely, bought his groceries, paid his car insurance, gave him spending money. When I asked why he got a free ride, Angela said he was finding his path and needed family support during this exploratory phase. My stepsister started college that fall at a private university that cost $60,000 a year. She pledged the most expensive sorority on campus, bought a wardrobe that probably cost more than my car, and went shopping every weekend on credit cards my dad paid off monthly. She called home crying about stress at least twice a week, and Angela would rush to her rescue with care packages and extra money for self-care. Meanwhile, I was working 25 hours a week at the coffee shop, taking online courses to graduate early, and still doing every household chore. The disparity was so blatant, it would have been funny if it wasn't my life. But I smiled and nodded and counted down the days until my 18th birthday. Angela's behavior shifted as my birthday approached. She started having these concerned conversations about adult responsibility, about how turning 18 meant making mature decisions, about how everyone in a household needed to contribute financially. She'd bring it up at dinner, casual but pointed, always while looking at me. When I was 18, she'd say, "I paid rent to my parents. It taught me the value of money. 18 is when you become an adult," she'd add. "That means pulling your own weight. We're a family, but families function on mutual contribution." The subtext was clear. Text. She was laying groundwork, building a narrative, preparing to demand that I pay rent in my own house. The house she didn't know I owned, the house she thought she had 2 more years to maintain control over. My dad seemed oblivious. Or maybe he was willfully ignorant. I honestly couldn't tell anymore. He'd become so conflict-averse that he'd nod along with whatever Angela said, just wanting everyone to get along. He'd stopped defending me years ago, stopped noticing when treatment was unequal. He'd chosen his new family over protecting his daughter, and we both knew it. I spent my 17th year preparing. I worked extra shifts and saved every penny. I researched tenant rights and property law. I made copies of all the trust documents and stored them in 3 different places. I contacted the lawyer who'd handled my grandparents' estate and confirmed the transfer would be automatic on my birthday. I planned exactly what I'd say and when I'd say it. The hardest part was maintaining the facade, acting like nothing had changed, doing my chores without complaint, pretending I didn't notice the way Angela looked at me sometimes, like she was calculating exactly how much she could extract before I figured out how to fight back. She had no idea I'd already won. That 2 months after my 18th birthday, I'd have legal control and she'd have nothing. The thought kept me going through every humiliating inspection, every unfair comparison to her golden children, every moment of being treated like hired help in my own home. 2 weeks before my birthday, I overheard Angela on the phone with someone. "Just 2 more years," she was saying. "Then it's ours completely. I've already been talking to contractors about renovations. The property value has increased substantially." She thought she had 2 years. She thought she had time. She had no idea her time had already run out. My birthday came and went quietly. My dad took me to dinner, gave me a card with some money. Angela baked a cake, and her kids signed a store-bought card without looking up from their phones. It was fine. I didn't need celebration. I needed the calendar to flip forward 1 more month until I could execute my plan. That month felt like years. I kept waiting for Angela to notice something had changed, but she didn't. The automatic transfer of ownership happened silently, just paperwork being filed somewhere in a government office. To everyone in the house, I was still just the teenage stepdaughter who cleaned toilets and made coffee for minimum wage. Then came the night that changed everything. I'd just finished a double shift at the coffee shop. 8 hours of dealing with entitled customers, broken machines, and a coworker who called in sick, leaving us short-staffed. My feet hurt. My back hurt. I smelled like espresso and burnt milk. All I wanted was to take a shower and collapse into bed. Angela was waiting in the kitchen. She'd positioned herself at the counter with a cup of tea, clearly having planned this ambush. My dad's car wasn't in the driveway. He was working late again. Her kids were in their rooms. It was just us. "We need to talk," she said before I'd even put my bag down. I was too tired for whatever this was. "Can it wait until tomorrow?" "No." She set down her tea with a definitive clink. "You're an adult now. You work. You make money. It's time you started contributing to this household like an adult." Here it was. The moment I'd been expecting. "I do contribute," I said carefully. "I clean the entire house. I cook half the meals. I do everyone's laundry. I mean financially." Her voice was sharp. "Your father and I have discussed it. You need to pay $800 a month in rent. $800. On my coffee shop salary, that was almost everything I made. And her kids, living here rent-free with every expense covered, would continue paying nothing. Your stepbrother pays rent? I asked, knowing the answer. He's between jobs. He's figuring things out. Your daughter? She's in school. Her education is expensive enough. I'm taking online classes too. Those are different. She's at a real university. Angela stood up, moving closer. This isn't a negotiation. You're an adult living in this house. You pay rent. $800. First payment due at the beginning of next month. Something inside me snapped. Years of swallowed anger, of biting my tongue, of playing nice to keep the peace. All of it came roaring to the surface. I was done. I was so done. No, I said. Her eyes widened. Excuse me? I said no, I'm not paying rent. Then you can find somewhere else to live, Angela said, her voice turning ice cold. Your father will support this decision. You can't live here for free while contributing nothing. I almost laughed. I actually felt my mouth twitch toward a smile. Contributing nothing. That's hilarious. This isn't funny. Call Dad, I interrupted. Call him right now. And get your kids down here. Everyone needs to hear this. Hear what? Just call them. Trust me, you're going to want witnesses. Something in my voice must have convinced her this wasn't a typical argument. She called my dad, told him to come home immediately. She yelled upstairs for her kids to come down. Within 20 minutes, we were all assembled in the living room like some twisted family meeting. My dad looked confused and worried. My stepbrother looked annoyed at being interrupted. My stepsister was still holding her phone, only half paying attention. Your stepdaughter has something to say, apparently, Angela announced, her tone suggesting I was about to make a fool of myself. I looked at each of them, took a breath, then detonated the bomb I'd been carefully constructing for 2 years. This house doesn't belong to you, I said to Angela. It never did. It belongs to me. My grandparents bought it, yes, but they put it in a trust with me as the beneficiary. I legally took ownership a month ago when I turned 18. The silence was beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Angela's face went through every stage of grief in about 10 seconds. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, all of it flashing across her features while her kids sat there confused, and my dad looked like someone had hit him with a brick. That's not possible, Angela finally said. Your father would have told me. Dad knew, I said, looking at him. The lawyer told everyone at the will reading. Remember? Dad's silence was confirmation. Angela's head whipped toward him so fast I heard her neck crack. You knew? You knew this whole time and didn't tell me? I thought... Dad started, but she cut him off. You thought what? That this was information you could just keep from your wife? It didn't seem relevant, he said weakly. She was only 16. We had 2 years. We had nothing. Angela was on her feet now, pacing. This changes everything. Every renovation, every improvement, every... She stopped, turning back to me. This doesn't matter. You're 18. You're barely an adult. You can't manage a property like this. There are taxes, maintenance, insurance. I'm aware, I said calmly. I've spent the last 2 years educating myself. I know exactly what's involved. My stepsister spoke up for the first time. Wait, so this whole house is hers? Like, legally? Apparently, I said. That's so unfair, she burst out. We've been living here for years. We have rights. Actually, I said, you don't. You're tenants at will. I could ask you to leave any time. The room went dead silent again. My stepbrother's mouth was hanging open. My stepsister looked like she might cry. Angela's face had gone from red to white to red again. You wouldn't, Angela said. You wouldn't throw your own family out. Family, I repeated. That's interesting. Is family making one person do all the housework while everyone else does nothing? Is family throwing away a dead woman's belongings? Is family demanding rent from the only person who actually owns the house? We should discuss this privately, Dad said, standing up. Everyone's emotional. Let's take a breath. No, I said firmly. We're discussing it right now, in front of everyone. The same way Angela wanted witnesses for demanding I pay rent. Angela tried a different tactic, softening her voice. Sweetie, I know things haven't been perfect, but we're family. We can work this out. Maybe we all just need to sit down and... I'm going to bed, I said, cutting off whatever manipulation she was about to attempt. We'll talk more tomorrow. I went upstairs, locked my bedroom door, and waited. I didn't have to wait long. Within an hour, I heard Angela's voice drifting up from the kitchen. She was on the phone, and she'd forgotten, or didn't care, How sound carried in this old house. I crept to the top of the stairs with my phone recording. I don't care what you have to do, Angela was saying. There has to be a way to contest this. She's 18. She's a child. We've been living here for 8 years. Doesn't that count for something? The other person must have said something because Angela got louder. Then we need to make living here so unpleasant she chooses to leave. She's going to college soon anyway, right? Once she's gone, we just stay. Possession is 9/10 of the law. More talking from the other end. I pressed closer to hear. He's weak, Angela said, and I knew she meant my dad. He'll side with me if I push hard enough. We'll convince her to sell, or sign the house over, or something. She's barely an adult. She doesn't understand what she's doing. We'll get a lawyer, explain the situation, show how we've improved the property, invested in renovations. That's not how property law works, a male voice said. Her brother, maybe? If the trust is legitimate, then we find a way to make it not matter, Angela snapped. Maybe she needs to go to college out of state. Maybe she needs to move for a job opportunity. Maybe her relationship with her father is so strained, she voluntarily gives up the house to avoid conflict. There are options. I stopped recording. I had everything I needed. The next morning, I waited until everyone was gathered for breakfast, a rare occurrence. But Angela had insisted we needed to talk as a family. My dad looked exhausted. Her kids looked hungover. Angela looked determined. Before anyone says anything, I announced, I have something you need to hear. I played the recording. Every word, every scheme, every casual reference to manipulating me out of my own property. Angela's face drained of color as her own voice filled the kitchen, plotting and planning, like I was some obstacle to remove, rather than a person. When it finished, the silence was deafening. My dad stared at Angela like he'd never seen her before. My stepsister had tears running down her face. Whether from embarrassment or genuine emotion, I couldn't tell. My stepbrother looked furious, though whether at his mother or at me remained unclear. So, here's how this is going to work, I said into the quiet. You want me to pay $800 a month in rent? Fine. You three are going to pay $1,200 each per month. That's $3,600 total, which is actually below market rate for a house this size in this neighborhood. You can't be serious, Angela breathed. I consulted a lawyer yesterday, I continued. I'm well within my rights as the property owner. You can pay rent or you can leave. Those are your options. Your father will never agree to this, Angela said, but her voice lacked conviction. She was looking at my dad, waiting for him to defend her, to take her side like he always had. He didn't say anything, just sat there, staring at the table, processing the fact that his wife had been plotting to steal his daughter's inheritance. The next few days were tense. Angela stopped speaking to me entirely, communicating only through aggressive note-leaving and dramatic sighs. Her kids avoided me. My dad tried to play peacemaker, suggesting we all just needed time to cool off, but even he seemed shaken by what he'd heard on that recording. I thought Angela might accept defeat. I really did. I underestimated her capacity for vindictive behavior. She cornered me in the hallway on Thursday evening. I was coming out of my room and she just appeared, blocking my path. Her face was calm, but her eyes were cold. You think you're very clever, she said quietly. Playing your little recording, making your little demands. But you have no idea what you've started. I know exactly what I've started, I replied, trying to move past her. She didn't budge. You're going to regret this. I will make your life such hell that you'll beg us to take this property off your hands. Every single day you stay in this house will be worse than the last. I promise you that. Is that a threat? It's a fact. She smiled, and it was one of the ugliest things I'd ever seen. You might own the house, but I've been running it for 8 years. Your father listens to me. My kids will make your life miserable. You'll have no peace, no privacy, no comfort. Every moment will be a battle. And eventually, you'll break. Everyone does. My phone was in my back pocket. I'd started keeping it there, recording app ready, because I'd learned that Angela's true nature only came out when she thought there were no witnesses. I pressed the button through my jeans, praying it would pick up her voice. You can't prove any of this, Angela continued. It's your word against mine. And who do you think your father will believe? His wife who's been taking care of him for 8 years? Or his ungrateful daughter who's trying to tear the family apart? I'm not tearing anything apart, I said. You did that yourself. Keep telling yourself that. But when you're sitting alone in this big empty house because your father chooses his wife over his daughter, remember this conversation. Remember that I gave you a chance to make this easy. She walked away. I waited until I heard her bedroom door close, then pulled out my phone and stopped the recording. Clear as crystal. Another threat. Another piece of evidence. I called the lawyer the next morning. He listened to both recordings, asked a few questions, and made some notes. "She's not very smart, is she?" he observed. "Threatening a property owner, discussing ways to coerce you into signing away your rights. If she keeps this up, you'll have grounds for a restraining order." "I don't want a restraining order," I said. "I want them gone." "Well, that's certainly doable. You can initiate eviction proceedings. Given that they're not paying rent and there's documented evidence of threats and coercion, the process should be straightforward." "How long?" 30 days from notice. Maybe less, given the circumstances. 30 days. One more month of living with people who hated me. In the house my grandparents had left me to protect me. It seemed both too long and not long enough. I didn't tell anyone about the lawyer visit. Instead, I went to work, came home, and watched Angela pretend everything was normal in front of my dad while shooting me looks that promised violence when he wasn't paying attention. Her kids had picked up on the tension and started their own campaign of petty annoyances. My stepbrother would blast music at 3 in the morning. My stepsister would use all the hot water before I could shower. They'd eat food I'd bought for myself and leave the empty containers in my room. But every time they did something, I documented it. Photos, videos, detailed notes with timestamps. I was building a case so airtight that no judge could possibly side with them. My dad finally approached me on Saturday. He looked awful, exhausted, guilty, torn. "I know things are bad right now," he started, "but I'm asking you as your father to reconsider." Angela spoke to a real estate agent. "We could sell this house, split the proceeds. Everyone gets something. We start fresh somewhere new." "Split the proceeds," I repeated. "Of my house." "It's not that simple." "It's exactly that simple. Grandma and Grandpa left this house to me, not to you, not to Angela. Me, because they knew this would happen. They knew she'd try to take it." He flinched. "They didn't know her. They knew her better than you did, apparently." The hurt on his face almost made me feel bad. Almost. But then I remembered 8 years of watching him choose her over me, of defending her when she threw away Mom's belongings, of letting me be treated like household staff while her kids lived like royalty. "You need to decide," I told him. "You're either my father or you're Angela's husband. You can't keep being both and expecting it to work out. That's not fair. Neither was anything she's done. But you never seemed to care about fairness before?" He left without another word. That evening, I heard him talking to Angela in their room. I couldn't make out all the words, but the tone was clear. He was finally standing up to her, telling her they needed to look for a new place, that this situation wasn't sustainable, that his daughter owned the house and they needed to respect that. Angela's response was loud enough for the entire house to hear. "If you take her side over mine, we're done." There was a long pause. Then I guess we're done." The eviction papers were delivered 2 weeks later by an officer in full uniform. He knocked on the door at 10 in the morning on a Tuesday, clipboard in hand, very official and very final. I'd arranged to be home from work specifically for this moment. Angela answered the door in her bathrobe, coffee in hand, probably expecting a delivery. Her face when she saw the uniform was priceless. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for Angela, her son, and her daughter." He read their names from his clipboard. "That's me. What's this about?" "I have legal documents that require your signature." He held out the envelope. Angela didn't take it. "I'm not signing anything. Ma'am, you don't have a choice. This is a formal eviction notice. You can accept the documents now, or I can leave them with you regardless. Either way, you've been legally notified." "Eviction?" Her voice went shrill. "This is my house. I've lived here for 8 years. According to these documents, the property owner has initiated eviction proceedings. You have 30 days to vacate the premises." I appeared in the hallway behind Angela. "The property owner is me," I said calmly. "I'm the one who filed the eviction." Angela whirled on me, the envelope falling from the officer's hand to the floor. "You absolute—" "Ma'am," the officer interrupted. "Sir." His voice firm. "I'm going to need you to remain calm. Violence or threats will only complicate your situation." "This is insane!" Angela was nearly screaming now. "She's 18. She's a child. She can't just throw people out of their home." "She's a legal adult and the documented property owner." "She absolutely can." The officer picked up the envelope and placed it on the entry table. "You've been served. I suggest you contact a lawyer if you have questions about the proceedings." Angela's kids had appeared at the top of the stairs, drawn by the commotion. My stepbrother immediately pulled out his phone and started recording. "This is crazy," he announced to his camera. "We're being thrown out of our house by my stepsister because she inherited it, and now she's on a power trip. You're being evicted because you're not paying rent, and your mother has made documented threats against the property owner," I corrected. "Also, put the phone away. I don't consent to being recorded." "Public space," he shot back. "Private property," the officer said. "If the owner asks you to stop recording, you need to stop." My stepsister was crying. Loud, dramatic sobs that probably could be heard down the street. "Where are we supposed to go? We don't have anywhere to go." "You have 30 days to find somewhere," I said. I was trying to stay calm, professional, but there was satisfaction in my voice, and I wasn't sorry about it. "That's longer than most people get." Angela tried one more tactic, softening her voice, putting on the reasonable adult face. "Officer, surely you can see this is a family dispute. She's upset with her stepmother. This is emotional, not legal. Can't we resolve this without involving the courts?" "The courts are already involved, ma'am. The eviction is legal and binding. I'm just here to deliver the notice." He nodded to me. "Miss, do you need me to stay while they process this information?" "No, thank you. I have cameras throughout the house documenting everything." That was news to Angela. Her eyes darted around the hallway, probably spotting the small security cameras I'd installed 2 weeks ago. "You've been recording us?" "Recording my property," I corrected, in case anyone decided to damage it out of spite. The officer left. Angela stood in the hallway, still holding her coffee, looking like someone had physically struck her. Her kids were both on their phones now, probably calling their dad, texting friends, posting on social media about their terrible stepsister. I didn't care. 30 days, Angela said finally. "You're giving us 30 days. It's what the law requires." "After everything we've done for you." "Done to me," I interrupted. "Everything you've done to me. There's a difference." My dad came home an hour later to chaos. Angela had called him at work, hysterical, demanding he fix this. He walked in to find boxes already being pulled out of closets, his wife rage-packing while shouting about ungrateful children and stolen property, and his stepdaughter filming the whole thing on her phone. "Are you recording this?" he asked, looking at me. "For my protection," I said, "in case anything goes missing or gets damaged." He looked around at the disaster zone his family had become. "I can't believe this is happening." "Really? You can't believe it?" I pocketed my phone. "Dad, she tried to charge me rent in my own house. She threw away Mom's things. She made me clean up after her kids for years while they contributed nothing. She conspired to manipulate me out of my inheritance." "Which part of this exactly surprises you?" He didn't have an answer. Just stood there looking defeated while Angela demanded he take her side, fight this eviction, protect his family. But for once, finally, after 8 years, he didn't rush to her defense. "I'll help you find an apartment," he said quietly. "But she's right. We need to leave." The screaming that followed probably terrified the neighbors. The 30 days crawled by like years. Angela stopped pretending to be civil. She'd walk past me in the hallway and mutter insults under her breath. Her kids left messes everywhere deliberately, garbage in the living room, food rotting in their bathrooms, wet towels moldering in corners. Every day was a new passive-aggressive assault designed to make me regret my decision. I documented everything, every mess, every insult, every attempt at psychological warfare. The cameras caught it all. My lawyer assured me this behavior only strengthened my case if they tried to fight the eviction. They tried. Of course they tried. Angela hired the cheapest lawyer she could find, probably all she could afford, and attempted to argue squatters' rights, common law tenancy, anything to delay the inevitable. The judge took one look at the trust documents, the recordings of Angela's threats, and the timeline of events, and denied every motion. The eviction stood. They had to be out by the 30th day. That final day arrived with the same moving company I'd hired to make sure it happened smoothly. I wasn't taking chances on them dragging their feet or claiming they needed more time. The movers showed up at 8 in the morning, ready to pack and remove everything that belonged to Angela and her kids. Angela was ready with a speech. She'd clearly prepared it, probably practiced it in the mirror. She stood in the foyer in designer clothes I'm sure my dad paid for, her kids flanking her like bodyguards, and announced to the movers, "We are leaving voluntarily. This is our choice. We have decided to exit this situation with our dignity intact, rather than continue living with someone so spiteful and vindictive." Nobody was buying it. The head mover just nodded politely and said, "Where should we start, ma'am?" The packing revealed exactly how much they'd accumulated over 8 years. Room after room filled with expensive clothes, electronics, Furniture that Angela had bought and claimed was for the house, but was clearly for her personal use. The movers loaded it all while Angela supervised with her arms crossed, occasionally snapping at them to be more careful. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. My stepbrother emerged from his room carrying a box that looked suspiciously familiar. I stepped in front of him. "What's in the box?" "My stuff." "Open it." "I don't have to show you." I pulled out my phone. "Open it or I call the police for theft." He opened it. Inside were photo albums. My photo albums. The ones with pictures of my mom, my childhood, family vacations before she died. Albums Angela had claimed were in the attic, but I'd never been able to find. "Those aren't yours," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "Mom said I could have them," he said, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. "Your mom doesn't get to give away my family photos." I took the box. "What else have you stolen?" That's when I found the rest. Hidden in their luggage, tucked into boxes labeled personal items, wrapped in their clothes. My mother's jewelry. Her wedding rings that my dad was supposed to have kept safe. The silver frame with her picture that used to sit on my dad's nightstand. Small valuables they thought I wouldn't notice or couldn't prove belonged to me. I'd made an inventory. I'd photographed everything valuable that was supposed to stay in the house. I'd learned from the spring cleaning incident to document what mattered. Now, with the movers as witnesses, I recovered each item one by one while Angela claimed it was all a misunderstanding. The sheriff I'd asked to supervise, because I'd known they'd try something, made notes of every recovered item. "You're lucky she's not pressing charges," he told Angela. "Theft is theft, even among family." "We're not family," I said clearly. "We never were." My dad arrived as the last boxes were being loaded. He looked terrible, like he'd aged 10 years in 30 days. He'd helped them find an apartment, a small 2-bedroom in a building with thin walls and no parking. He was going to stay with them temporarily while they figured things out. The downgrade from this house to that apartment must have been brutal. He approached me while Angela supervised the final loading. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have protected you. I should have seen what was happening." "Yes," I agreed. "You should have. Your mother would be disappointed in me. She'd be disappointed you let someone throw away her belongings and didn't defend your daughter." I wasn't going to sugarcoat it. "You chose Angela. Every single time you chose her over me." "I know." Tears were running down his face now. "I know, and I can't take it back. But I'm choosing right now." I told Angela I'm filing for divorce. That surprised me. "Really?" "Really. Hearing those recordings, seeing how she treated you, watching her try to steal your inheritance. I can't pretend anymore. I married someone I didn't really know, and I let her poison our family." "Our family was already poisoned," I said. "Mom died, and we never really recovered. We just built something new around the wound." Angela exploited that. The movers finished. Angela's car and a rental truck were packed full. Her kids were already in the vehicle, refusing to say goodbye. Angela gave the house one final look, her expression promising future retribution, then got in the driver's seat without a word. My dad lingered. "Can I call you? Maybe get coffee sometime?" "Maybe," I said. "After your divorce is final. After you've proven you can actually stand up for yourself without someone pushing you to do it." He nodded, accepted the boundary, and left. I watched the vehicles drive away, taking 8 years of misery with them. The house was finally mine, quiet and empty and clean and mine. I walked back inside and locked the door behind me. The first night alone in the house was surreal. I walked through every room, running my hands over surfaces that no longer needed inspection, opening closets that held only my things, sitting in chairs without wondering if someone was going to criticize how I was sitting. The silence was profound. After years of tension and hostility, the absence of it felt almost loud. I spent the first week just cleaning. Really cleaning, the kind that goes beyond surface-level maintenance. I scrubbed away 8 years of other people's presence. I opened windows and let fresh air sweep through rooms that had felt suffocating. I took down Angela's tasteless decorations and stored them in the garage in case she tried to claim I'd stolen them. The second week, I started reclaiming spaces. My stepbrother's room became my home office. I bought a decent desk, set up my laptop, created a workspace that was actually mine. My stepsister's room became a yoga studio, something I'd always wanted to try but never had the peace or privacy to attempt. I rolled out a mat in the empty room and did beginner videos on my phone, enjoying the luxury of knowing no one would walk in and mock me. I found things as I cleaned. Mom's ornaments that Angela had claimed were donated but had actually just been hidden in the back of a closet. Photos that had been removed from frames and shoved in drawers. Small pieces of my childhood that had been erased but not destroyed. Each discovery felt like getting a piece of my mother back. My mom's best friend reached out 3 weeks after the eviction. She'd heard through mutual friends what happened. Small communities talk, especially when there's drama. She asked if she could visit. I said yes, hungry for connection to someone who'd actually known my mother. She brought old photos I'd never seen, stories I'd never heard. We sat in the living room, Mom's living room, not Angela's, and talked for hours. When she mentioned she was looking for a new place after her roommate moved out, I offered her the guest room. Having her in the house felt right, like a piece of Mom's history coming home. The house slowly transformed. It stopped being the place where I'd been mistreated and became the sanctuary my grandparents had intended. I cooked Mom's recipes from the cards I'd saved. I hung photos of my grandparents in places of honor. I planted flowers in the garden, the ones my grandmother had loved, the ones Angela had torn out to make room for decorative rocks. Dad called occasionally. True to his word, he'd filed for divorce. Angela was fighting it naturally, trying to claim she deserved half of everything despite their prenup. She'd started a social media campaign about being abandoned by her husband and abused by her stepdaughter. People who knew us didn't believe it. People who didn't know us did. But I didn't care about the opinions of strangers. My dad and I met for coffee about 2 months after he'd left. He looked better, lighter, somehow. The divorce was messy, but he was standing firm. He'd moved into his own apartment, away from Angela and her kids. He was in therapy. He'd quit his high-stress job and taken something with better hours and less travel. "I'm trying to be the person I should have been," he said. "For you, for your mom's memory. I appreciate that," I told him. "But you need to be that person for yourself, not for me." We were rebuilding, slowly, carefully. There was a lot of damage to repair, years of choosing wrong that couldn't be undone with apologies. But he was trying, and I was willing to meet him halfway. That felt like enough for now. I started therapy too. Turned out 8 years of emotional abuse leaves marks that don't disappear just because the abusers are gone. I needed help processing the anger, the resentment, the complicated guilt that sometimes surfaced when I thought about how harsh I'd been. My therapist assured me the guilt was normal but misplaced. I'd protected myself and my inheritance. That wasn't cruelty. It was survival. Work got easier without the stress of home life crushing me. I got promoted to shift supervisor, started taking actual college classes instead of just online courses, made friends with coworkers who didn't know anything about my history and just liked me for me. Built a life that was mine, completely and totally mine. 6 months after the eviction, I was doing yoga in my studio when I heard from my father that Angela's family had moved out of state. Apparently, the apartment had been too expensive, the area too judgmental once people learned what had happened. They'd relocated somewhere cheaper, somewhere without memories of their failed attempt at stealing a house. I felt nothing hearing that news. Not satisfaction, not relief, not even curiosity about where they'd gone. They'd simply ceased to matter. That, more than anything, told me I was healing. The house my grandparents bought to save us had done its job. It had sheltered us through grief, provided stability when everything else fell apart, and ultimately protected me from people who saw me as an obstacle rather than family. Every room held memories of my mom, my grandparents, the good years before Angela arrived. Standing in my kitchen making my grandmother's cinnamon rolls, I felt my mother's presence. Not in a ghost story way, but in the recipes I knew by heart, the laugh I'd inherited, the stubbornness that had let me fight back. She would have been proud, I thought. Proud that I'd stood up for myself. Proud that I'd protected what her parents built for me. The house was finally what it was always meant to be. Mine.